Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Watch No Evil. I'm Matt,
And I'm Zach.
and today we're talking about Paranormal Activity from 2007. This film has an important place in a legacy of found footage films, especially considering its sort of history with creating this genre where audiences connect with the characters significantly more than they would for actors. And this is because the people that are being portrayed in these found footage films are often untrained actors. They are either new to the actual craft, and in that sense, can sometimes give more raw emotion. I'm thinking about movies like The Blair Witch Project, which was a cultural phenomenon, or even going back to the 1980s with Cannibal Holocaust, which created a huge amount of controversy. And one of the ways that this film was marketed was as one of the scariest movies of its time because of its status as a found footage film. However, I don't think that this film is as successful as they are. Zach, what do you think?
But it depends on like what your definition of successful is, because successful in which one scared me more, or successful as in like what did they do at the box office? Like how many people were into these movies? Like what do you mean by that?
My metric of success is how much of it is a believable phenomenon. Because one of the things that the Blair Witch Project did so well was presenting material that you could believe was found footage.
Oh, yeah, that's the whole thing. Is like they both movies play it off as like this is footage found from, and I agree with that. The Blair Witch Project as a found footage film is more believable. That's like, okay, this happened like in the middle of nowhere, as opposed to like this happened in someone's home. Although with this, to an outsider, you would really only see the aftermath of all this. The psychic was the only person to come in besides Katie's sister, and she didn't really seem like she was like experience any of the demonic activity. So, to the unknowing outsider, this would just look like a murder, a breaking in or in murder, or like a murder, depending on the ending that you choose to take in this movie. Could be like murder suicide, and like there's a mental break, and she murdered her boyfriend and then herself, or or she just murdered her boyfriend. And so much of this could be like, oh, is a psychotic break rather than just like the unknown of being in the woods in the Blair Witch Project.
Right. I think that there is something that makes this more terrifying in that it has sort of a domesticity to it. With the
Yes.
Blair Witch Project, it's very much just like, okay, well, I ain't going in no goddamn woods in the middle of the night. Like,
Especially
I'm,
not haunted woods.
yeah, ripped to the Blair Witch, but I'm different. But this movie in particular, it's scary too from an outside perspective, not only because as far as anyone knows outside of the situation, everything that happened is sort of above the supernatural board. But then watching it, it's a really slow burn, and there's something about it being this demon movie. But I think that the idea that this could happen in your own home, that you could suddenly one day be experiencing some sort of demonic presence, and that it could manifest itself in seemingly mundane ways until all of a sudden it is severe. It's really terrifying.
Yeah, and I think that's why this movie was so popular and got such like a following, because it's almost like the opposite of I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. That film had a terrible plot but had a lot of production value to it. And then this film is the opposite. It has a really good plot and like really terrible production value because it had no budget. I think a lot of the plot comes from breaking convention. The plot has no resolution, and that was shocking to a lot of people. It has a great buildup of intensity. Like it starts in like the first few days of them are just like kind of goofing off, and like you might see the door move or something, or maybe there be nothing that happens at all. Like you don't really feel all that scared, and then it ramps up pretty quickly, and then it seems to like die down a little bit. So it's kind of like this roller coaster of intensity And then, of course, at the end, it just skyrockets and then just ends.
The idea of the slow burn, it really is almost in a way antithetical to what we think of as being the Hollywood blockbuster. I mean, when people think horror movies in a current era, they want the jump scares and they want the Freddy versus Jason slasher elements, or they want a really visceral, haunting experience. And this movie was not that at all. It was all about these really slow burns that make you wait for everything. And I think even showing that in the time-lapse footage, there's something that is so eerie and off-putting, thinking about how she's just standing at the foot of the bed and just watching her husband sleep. And we see that clock tick up and up and up, and it goes higher and higher. It taps into that sort of innate fear of the dark and how we think that we're being watched by something even when we sleep. And it's so interesting, and I think it's become really impactful for a lot of the found footage films that came after it, which were things like Wreck, things like Cloverfield. These movies begin to increase in frequency, but none of them were able to ever really capture the like calm domesticity of this movie. Even if the acting's not great, which let's be frank, it's just terrible. Not believable. Even just like sort of watching the husband and the wife interact, there are a couple of moments where it's just like, yeah, these seem like real regular people, and I think that is an effective way of doing this movie, having amateur actors sort of play those roles, so it gives sort of a naivete to it. That being said, I think that the lead actor, the man who played Mika, did a little bit of a better job than Katie.
Yes, I would agree.
Just because something about his performance seemed a little bit more frat boyish. It seemed a little bit more like, I'm a dude and I got a camera and I also play guitar sometimes. Like, it seemed a little bit more fun.
Yeah, I think that the role that he was supposed to be portraying was like an easier one to fall into. He's the goofball skeptic, and Katie's the one, like, she's the one that is supposed to have the weight of the demonic presence. Like, she's had this presence following her whole life, and there's like this whole there's a story to her character that Mika's character doesn't have, and I feel like they tried to make her definitely the more emotional character. But there are moments where her acting does shine, like when she gets mad at Mika for like antagonizing the demon. She's really good at like those angry rants when they're fighting.
Yeah, it seems like she really had a grasp on the extremes of the emotion. So when she was really scared or when she was really mad. But yeah, you're totally right. Like, when they're having the fight 2/3 through the movie, her expressiveness comes through a lot more than when she was talking to the priest, where it feels really scripted.
Part of it is, I don't even know if these actors were paid. The original budget for this movie was quite small. So small that I don't believe that they got paid. So there's that. And then also, do you know how the script was handled?
I do not. How was the script handled?
Okay, basically, I think that scene that you're mentioning with the psychic guy was like the only scripted scene. Otherwise, there was no script. There
that
was
would
just
explain it.
Right. They were just told how to behave and any like plot points that they're supposed to discuss in a given scene. So basically, in those scenes where like nothing really happens, they're just like kind of talking. They're just talking about whatever. And that also explains why there is this kind of natural, like there will be, just like with podcasting, like you hit the record button and like there's this natural back and forth that happens. We speak in natural patterns. There are uhs and ahs that sometimes we edit out, but sometimes we leave them in because it's a natural speech. See, there I go. It's a natural speech pattern.
Very hard to edit out.
Yeah, exactly. But it just makes it more believable. And as a found footage film, that's kind of what they're going for. And there are also these moments and situations within the film that are just realistic beyond the dialogue. For example, when the demon starts like shaking the chandelier or something, like they're hearing the demon doing something downstairs and they're kind of like freaking out in their bedroom. And the way that they both just kind of stand in the doorway of the bedroom, they're completely still. They're not saying anything. They're just looking down the stairs all scared. And there's just something so relatable about that.
And so believable.
Right.
Just
And
like a
like
paralysis.
that's exactly what I would do in my, like if I heard some noises in my kitchen or something and I'm upstairs sleeping and I wake up to that, you better believe I'm going to stand at the top of the stairs and like listen to see if it continues or gets louder or something else happens to make me like kind of realize what the situation is like.
Yeah, if I hear the door to the refrigerator close a little bit too loudly because the demon got out his blueberry milk cereal, I'd be panicking too. Like, it's just a natural reaction. And I think that there's so many times in these like horror movies where the father figure will hear a noise and the mom will be like, oh, honey, what was that? Go check it out. And he'll like surreptitiously pull a baseball bat from like inside the pillowcase that he just happens to have. And he'll like brandish it and just be like, okay, and walk out. And I think that in this case, what they're doing is so much more realistic. There's a sort of brashness that is portrayed that is not relatable to people. And actually, that is one of the highlights of this movie, especially there are so many times when things happen outside of the bedroom and we don't get to see them. And they're so much more effective because we don't get to see them. We get to hear them. We get to see the aftermath, but we don't ever get to see the thing happening. Like when she gets dragged out of the room and then there's like a scuffle in the hallway. There's something very Rear Window about it.
These things happening off camera, at least earlier on in the movie, it's producing a lot of the fear. I mean, you don't really see anything happen on camera besides her getting dragged out of the room and then when she throws Mika's dead body at the camera at the end. That's it.
You're totally right, especially with the second film. So much of the movie is on this like security camera. So we still get the same as an audience member feeling of voyeurism, and we are watching, and more than just watching, we are powerless. We are unable to help these people at all, but we get to just sort of watch in this, abject terror as their lives are flipped upside down. And having said that, I think that the second film, it carries on that spirit really well. It is still a good movie, and I actually like it a little bit better than this one.
Really?
Oh yeah, I like the second one better, I think. I think the second one scared me more than this one.
I think the second one was like the weakest in the series.
Okay, so you didn't see the third or fourth or fifth?
Okay, so the third one is when Katie and her sister are young, right? It's like in the 80s.
Oh, I thought that was the second one.
I'm pretty sure that the second one is like, it takes place right after the plot of this one, and she goes to her sister's house.
Oh, you're totally right. It's Paranormal Activity 3 that I was thinking of. Paranormal Activity 3 is the good one. 1 and 3 are the only two good ones.
I thought the Ghost Dimension was like, okay. It got weird.
Well, my official recommendation is if you're gonna watch the Paranormal Activity series, start on Saturday morning, 10 o'clock, and just watch them all straight through. I think that is the most coherent way to deliver the entire story, and it also masks some of the more terrible stuff. You get this sort of sense of found footage.
I have no problems with the found footage style.
I think it's great. I think that there's a lot of wonderful movies that have come out of it. I think Wreck is awesome. It's a great found footage film.
Yeah, and I wonder what it is. You hardly ever see any other genre of film use this style of cinematography. And there is something to it being horror because it limits your vision and your scope as the viewer. Like there are things that you cannot see that are not being shown to you. With other types of films, I guess that wouldn't work as well. But you think like with maybe like a mystery or like some kind of like crime thrillers or something that might be.
But yeah, there is certainly like unilaterally a horror emphasis in found footage. And I think that it's because it's one of the few versions of this narrative that can come across as genuine, because we like to be scared, and having a found footage film makes those characters sort of more relatable. The other ones that I sort of think that would be good found footage would be like war movies. In some war movies, you like get that aesthetic sometimes. Same with like Super 8. A lot of Super 8, a lot of the storytelling is done through the like footage that they record. So there's a much more significant hybridization of style in those movies versus a horror movie where you can lean completely into the genre without it feeling alienating.
It's just you'd think you'd see it more, because I guess you see it sometimes in shows like The Office, where it's like that kind of like mockumentary kind of style, which is, I mean, it's similar. Like you get the shaky camera hand the whole time. And you just think that you'd see more film since it's so popular in TV, and like as we see more of the film industry going to Netflix and Hulu and these streaming services, basically film is becoming more like television. And you just think that you would see more of that crossover, especially in modern film. Oh, let's talk about the the time-lapse effect.
Yeah.
And because we kind of talked about that while we were watching it, and we wonder how they did that. Like, they must not have had them lay in bed for hours.
She didn't stand at the foot of the bed for 3 hours, which I just want to say, I think that if you're going to make a movie with a time lapse like that, you get somebody who can do it. You know what? I'm going all in on this one. Performance artists, durational art is totally common now. I think that if you want to say that you are a truly committed artist, you are committed to the craft, you should be willing to stand in a single place for 6 hours while they film you just watching a dude sleep.
Yeah, hello, OSHA? I just don't think that they can do that.
Why?
They may have.
I personally know artists who have done work like this.
Well, yes, they have to be willing to, and I'm sure they have to sign some stuff.
They got contracts. That's negotiable.
Man, I don't think they expected anything to come of this movie.
But you know what? This launched Blumhouse Productions.
Mm-hmm.
I think that with this movie, it is actually an important entrance into the horror genre. It did sort of, for a time, revolutionize a lot of horror movies, especially in like the possession field.
I feel like I have to give this film some credit for my personal interest in horror movies, because this came out when we were teenagers, and I'd like never really seen that many horror movies. Like, I didn't grow up in a family that watched horror movies all the time like you did. As teenagers, you watch horror movies whether they're good or not. And this one was like very popular at the time. And so I like went and saw it. I was like, wow, this really scary movie, and it haunted my dreams for a while, but I liked it. Truth be told, it's like not a great movie, but it's really enjoyable.
Oh, for sure. I think that it is an enjoyable movie, and I think that it's totally fine to enjoy it. I have a pretty significant horror movie upbringing, and this movie still impacts me. When I saw, at least, it still got some like startling moments, especially that like ending 3 minutes. It's so frightening. There's something that is just like, you feel like you're underwater and everything is coming at you and it's happening, and it's just, you feel so defenseless. Just like sitting in your chair watching this woman for 2.5 minutes, just slowly stepping towards you, and then the face sort of distorts and she lunges at the camera. It's not really even the jump scare. I'm nervous before that moment.
I think part of it too is that it's just like it leaves you with that haunting feeling, and that I think is what's so scary about it, is that you don't get any resolution. They say Mika's body was found later, and that's all. The movie's done after that, and it's like this sense of dread that just follows you after.
I think that there's something interesting in the idea of who you are supposed to relate to in this movie. There's sort of this intimacy that we grow with these people, and they're not good actors, but there's something about the close proximity with them. We sort of see like a very human, very connectable person. But with Mika, rather than with Katie, Mika is really the protagonist with which we sort of see ourselves, because he's the one operating the camera. He's the analogy for the audience's perception of Katie's what looks like mental illness that evolves into true supernatural horror. And so there's something equally terrifying about us relating with Mika, watching someone that he, and by extension we, love, experience this paranormal activity. Dun dun dun.
That's the name of the movie.
That's the name of the movie.
I think that may have been by design. They're like, what do we call it? I don't know, Paranormal Activity.
Oh, I do want to say, though, he's got an EVP reader, and he's, like, testing the audio with the EVP reader. And that moment, I was just like, yeah, I don't think so. He don't know what he's doing.
He's using Audacity.
Yeah. Hey, we don't knock Audacity.
No. Guess what we're using to record this, guys?
We don't knock Audacity in this household.
Oh my god, I feel even more connected to Mika than you said earlier.
He too operates a podcast.
He's got his like stock trading podcast or something. But it's funny that you say you end up relating more to Mika than Katie, because I feel, despite that, I feel like I relate more to Katie just because of how she is more cautious about the situation. If I were in this situation, I would be, we're not filming this because that seems to anger the demon, and we're not going to try to feed into its negative energy, so let's try not to escalate our disagreements and all that stuff. Like, hey, this whole situation could be avoided, right? If we just kind of let the demon do its thing without trying to piss it off and film it.
But is that in any way ignorant? For her to think, if I ignore it, it will go away?
I think it's basically using the logic of, this thing has been with me since, what'd she say, when she was 8? Mm-hmm. And has been coming and going seemingly, or just being dormant for years and then being a little more active at other times.
There's a trope in possession movies like this, and it sort of, for me, goes back to like the Rosemary's Baby style of possession, which is whenever a demon comes into this world, they like latch themselves onto a woman more than a man so that they could like ultimately impregnate them with the Antichrist. And so there's always this like element of unholy union. If you look at this movie through that lens and sort of the historical perspective of these demon possession movies, they are threatened almost by the presence of a man in the home.
That's definitely true here. And I wonder if there's some kind of statement, because, I mean, you got me thinking here. With possession, it's like the demon is inside her. So that could be like a kind of impregnating seed.
Yeah, well, because, I mean, with Rosemary's Baby, she gives birth to the Antichrist. That sort of idea of women descending into madness after having given birth. That idea, which is archaic, has sort of translated into this horror genre.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that the demon is not a fan of Mika's presence. The picture of Mika and Katie is like all cracked because they heard like as if something hit it. The point of impact where you see all the cracks in the glass like kind of coming out of is right in the middle of Mika's face, as if the demon like punched right on Mika's face. And then they're in the kitchen, and Mika's waving the knife around, and then he's like, we're gonna figure out what's going on here, and and then he like makes this motion as if like he's gonna like slit whoever's throat.
Yeah, it's weirdly graphic and sort of uncomfortable.
Right, there's that, but then it's like it's a threat to the demon, and the demon, of course, sees that, and it's I believe it's this exact same knife that he possesses Katie to kill him with. So it's kind of like this full circle thing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Demon doesn't like Mika.
I never think about that. Yeah, it's like
I hadn't either until I saw that again at the beginning. I just want to talk about these weird things that were put in the movie. Like the demon book that Mika has, like that he's like flipping through in bed.
Is so book.
Clearly, it's a coloring book. It's so clearly a coloring book. There's like one page that had words on it, and there were like 10 words on it. And otherwise it's like,
Oh, yeah.
it's all, you can tell it's like that coloring book page texture. You know how it's like that paper feels different? Yeah. And like it rips so easily. You can tell that's like what that is.
It's so clear that he's just like, I have this book and it is a prop and I will use it as such.
Well, I wonder if that was like, they're like, all we could find was a coloring book. We couldn't find an actual like textbook on demons. So like, here, don't like keep it in one spot too long or they'll notice.
Yeah, I think that, well, that would be certainly the case, but two, it's so hard to do that kind of thing because if you just look at like a bunch of text, it's like, well, we can't read that text. But if you show a picture of Baphomet, you're like, ooh, evil demon goat devil incarnation. Like, I know what that is.
Right. And then also the Ouija board.
Yeah.
The Ouija board, I don't think that was a real Ouija board either. I think that was like a placemat or something. It looked like it was a placemat.
I think that I thought that it was a real Ouija board, but my favorite part about that was when she was just like, you bought the nicest damn Ouija board you could find? And he's like, I borrowed it. He's just like...
Well, it had a pentagram on it. Why do they have a pentagram on it?
Right, it's clearly... It was made by Mattel. But, you know, they did have the Oculus for it. It was clear that the Oculus and the Ouija placemat were not from the same set.
It's like a camera lens cover with a hole punched out of it.
Well, you know, they stayed in that guy's house for 10 days. They needed to just work with what they could.
I mean, that was most of the budget. This is probably the rent on that house. As it really was in California, so.
No, it was the director's house.
Oh, okay. Never mind then. He likes cheetah print.
I mean, it was a lovely floor plan.
Well, I feel like instead of in 2006, they should have like set this in 2000 or like the late 90s or something, because then I would have been like, okay, the decor makes sense. Mm-hmm. Rather than 2006, it seemed like it was a bit dated at that point.
For sure. It definitely did feel like it was dated. It's clear that they had no other ways of doing lighting or setting, and so they had to work almost exclusively with like natural light, and with the decor that they had, they couldn't go outside of that realm. I mean, he also wore the same clothes as pajamas for like 4 nights in a row, according to this movie.
Listen, wash your clothes. Everyone listening, go do a load of laundry right now.
Right now. Listen to this while you're doing laundry.
Also, don't invest in tile counters like they did in their kitchen. Don't do that. That's disgusting. Because then shit gets in the grout. You gotta like get that out of there, and it just like wears down, and it's not worth the money. Just get nice quartz or like granite, or you're gonna pay more for it, but you don't have to redo your kitchen as soon after that. So just don't get tile counters.
At what point did our personal biases take over as the brunt of the podcast?
Last week. Okay, so let's get back to actual movie stuff. Okay, so the demon. They make a big point of saying it's a demon, not a ghost, and the sidekick warns Mika not to invite the demon into any interactions, and Mika then mocks both the demonologist and the demon right in front of the camera, and then we also find out that it feeds off of negative energy. And as Mika and Katie kind of get more stressed out by it, they're starting to be more at each other's throats, that they're feeding into the demon's power, basically, because earlier on you wouldn't really see anything happen on the cameras until that 3 o'clock hour, you know, the witching hour, and then as they feed it, it gets more power, and then it punches that picture during the day, breaks the picture, it like breathing on Katie during the day, and then it's just like doing stuff whenever it wants. Mm-hmm. Oh, also, one other thing that I noticed is a lot of times during the night footage, you would hear these heavy footsteps like coming up the stairs, and you're like, oh, here comes the demon, and then it would do something in their bedroom or do something like it would slam the door or whatever. And that came back to me at the end of the movie when Katie's coming up the stairs after killing Mika, and she's like carrying his body, and her footsteps are
the heavy ones.
Yeah, I think they used the same audio, but I think it's also supposed to be like maybe some like weird time thing or like a foreshadowing.
Yeah, that would be an interesting use of that. And I mean, it's definitely supposed to connect. There is sort of a connection. Everything that happens before the final night is alluding to what Katie ends up actually doing.
But then also they sprinkled the powder right? To see like where it's going, or I don't even know what their motivation was there. Then they do see its footprints. There's this funny moment where they like hear something happen, and then Katie goes, "Oh my god!" And because she's like looking down at the powder and must have seen the footprints, but she has that reaction before they turn the lights on.
Yeah.
So it's like she wouldn't have seen it yet.
Right.
There's just kind of a funny kind of plot hole there. But anyways, the footprints themselves are really weird and like alien looking, and I really hate it. Like I wish they would have just done like hoof prints or something.
Yeah, something a little more classical demon.
All right, I'm out of things to talk about. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
I don't have anything else. I'm good. I think we covered it.
Okay. So, again, not a great pun movie. Let's do some trivia. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
What do you
mean?
Be a quick one.
Do you know how many parodies have used this movie as puns?
Yeah, but I can't.
Paranormal Activity?
Paranormal. There you go. I'm just off my game.
If it was a yogurt commercial, it would be Paranormal Activia. A continent's yogurt for ghosts. Paranormal Activia.
Do you want to regulate your digestive system?
Do you not have a digestive system? Then we have the yogurt for you.
Are the cornflakes in hell getting stale? How do you like? They use goat's milk to make that. Like, what flavors would it come in?
Blueberry.
All right, let's do some questions here. So we talked about that this is a very short filling process, right? Mm-hmm. Do you know exactly how many days?
10 days.
Took them 10 days. Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if it was like 13? All right. Oh, what filmmaker was consulted before the movie was released?
What filmmaker?
Yes.
Like a director?
Yes.
Steven Spielberg.
You're right. So Steven Spielberg, he actually gave them the idea for the ending that was actually put in. Their original ending was different. And if you have this on like DVD or something, or you could even look it up on the internet, you could see the original ending that they have. And it's pretty much the same with how Mika is, he dies off screen, and then she comes back up to the room. Instead of with his body, she comes up alone, and she's still holding the bloody knife that she killed him with.
Mm-hmm. And she kills herself.
That's actually one of the alternate endings.
Oh, really?
In this one, she just kind of holds the bloody knife and then goes into a catatonic state, and you see the camera like does that speed up thing, and she sits there for 2 days before the police come. And then since she comes at them with the knife, but she's not like trying to kill them or anything, she's probably like just trying to explain, or she's still in like this weird state of mind. So since she's coming at them with a knife, they shoot her. And I think that they definitely went with the right choice.
Yeah, well, that type of ending has been done before with like Cabin Fever, but also with the original Night of the Living Dead. The main character at the end exits the house and gets gunned down by a firing squad because they think that he's a zombie, even though he's not.
Oh.
So I agree. I think that this is actually a little bit more of an original ending.
Yeah, and I think that it plays, like we talk about the ending a lot, is that's basically like what defines this movie as what it is. And I think that they definitely made the right choice. And if with her dying, they really closed the door to sequels as they made, I'm sure that they're grateful that they went with this ending instead. But also it kind of ends the story, like the whole story is that she's the one that's haunted and the demon is attached to her. And if you kill her, that kind of like, it doesn't give us any sort of satisfaction of like, all right, like now we understand more. It's just we still don't have anything to go on. Whereas if she's left alive, then it's like, okay, one, she's possessed by a demon. She is a danger to the public.
Yeah,
that's a bad thing.
She's out there.
And two, we have hope of like finding out more about her. So it both increases the fear, but also gives us a little bit of hope for understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Also, Steven Spielberg, when he was like first watching it, when he was being consulted, he was watching it at night, and he got really scared like halfway through the movie, so he stopped watching it and then waited until the next day when the sun was out to finish it up.
Relatable content. I would do it too.
And you know, everyone who's seen this movie has like the first time you saw it, like you saw it with your friends or like you saw it with with someone. Like almost no one's watching this movie by themselves for the first time. Steven Spielberg was though, and that's the whole different kind of frightening experience.
Oh yeah.
Anyways, next question: what was the budget for this film?
I actually know this one. It was like $15,000.
Yeah, that you got it. That was the original budget, and then
Made like what,
that's
193 million?
so it's when it was an indie film, it's $15,000 to make it, and then Paramount Pictures picked it up, made some edits, filmed the new ending that Spielberg suggested, and that all took for some reason that all took $200,000. Didn't really they didn't reshoot anything except the ending, so I'm not sure. I don't know if a lot of that was put into marketing or effects.
I would imagine that it
what.
went into marketing.
It had to have been like a lot of post-production kind of stuff, like
Yeah.
effects. I don't know, sound design maybe. Yeah, this film is the second highest production cost to box office ratio of any film. The first one actually being Blair Witch Project.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's funny that you mentioned that earlier. Yeah,
Well, that one was just like, hey kids, here's a couple of cameras. We're gonna go walk through the woods, and I want y'all to get stressed out. And they did it, and then they were like, yo, we should like sell this.
Next question. I'm in a rambly mood tonight. What year did this film hit theaters?
2007, right?
Nope. This is actually a trick question. 2009. Right. It's probably when you remember seeing it. Or actually, you said you saw the third one first, right?
I did.
Okay. So never mind. Yeah. So this was completed and premiered in 2007, but it actually hung out in the film festival circuit for a while.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I think this is back when it was in its $15,000 stage, and someone at Paramount must have
saw it and picked it up for distribution.
Right. So then they're like, hey, we're going to give you a bunch of money, and we're going to get you into some theaters and market it. I don't know if that's exactly what happened, but I'm assuming it's probably what happened. And then they got put in theaters 2009.
I'm not surprised that it was able to make the transition to, the theater sphere. There is a sort of odd charm about the movie that I think resonates well enough with audiences that they knew that they could capitalize on it, and they totally did.
And it still feels like an indie film, not just because of the found footage nature of it, but also because it's just different. Like, it doesn't feel like your normal 2007 horror movie.
Yeah.
And 2007 was like a really, really important year for cinema because 2007, 2008, that was when those Batman movies were coming out. That's when Iron Man came out.
Yeah, the idea of the blockbuster started to radically shift towards like the summer superhero movie.
Right, and that was like that kind of like shaped not the actual like plot or anything of movies, but it kind of shaped like how movies were treated in theaters. It's just like there's this idea of not only a blockbuster, but like the mega blockbuster.
There was a weird sort of revival of the theater scene, I think.
And now it's going to die in disgrace.
Well, drive-in theaters are coming back. There's a huge one in Bloomington, Illinois,
really?
where Zach and I went and did our undergraduate degrees. There is a super successful drive-in theater that does like a lot of old monster movie double features and stuff.
Oh, we got to make a trip.
We do.
Okay. I do want to make our plug again. We do have our Instagram account at Watch No Evil. Follow us if you like to listen, if you want to get updates on new episodes.
You can also follow us or subscribe on YouTube. We have Watch No Evil podcast on YouTube. So that is another place where if you would like to change up your method of delivery, we can accommodate.
Right. And also, if you want to leave a review or a rating on whatever platform you listen to us on, that would be great too. If you enjoy listening to the podcast and you have, say, a friend or a family member that is into horror movies, tell them about us.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening today. This has been Watch No Evil Paranormal Activity Edition. This is Zach.
And this is Matt.
And we will get you next week with a new episode.